Morning, everybody. How are you?
Morning.
Good. Morning. So I'm Adrienne Weissman. I'm the CMO and Chief Customer Officer at G2 Crowd. Maybe we can go really quickly around and introduce ourselves and give a quick snippet on what you guys do.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Liam. I'm the brand director at Algolia. We're a hosted search API. We help product teams create search to connect their users with what matters most.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicola. I'm the VP of Marketing at GoCardless. We make it simple for subscription businesses to take recurring payments via direct debit, so just debit.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lidia. I am the CMO of Bynder. We're developing a tool that helps global brands like Spotify or Puma to actually achieve and maintain brand consistency by having kind of a web shop for all branded materials.
Awesome, thank you. And G2 Crowd is the world's leading software and services review site. We're designed to help in-market buyers select the right software, as well as help vendors find the right in-market prospects for their brand. So thinking about all the preparation we did for this, maybe Liam, maybe start with us about what does brand actually mean to you and your company? I think it's a question we all often ask. So maybe start there.
Yeah, happy to. So I joined Algolia about a year ago to be as brand director. And Algolia is a company that's always had a very authentic and strong brand. Our core audience and our core users are developers, and their opinion of us matters a lot. If you've ever worked in a developer tools company, you know that that opinion can sway very quickly. So we're always very mindful of how people perceive us. And essentially, my job is to be, I always say I'm the self-conscious mind of the company. So I'm really worried about what people think of us. And that can be in any way that they interact with us. So it can be meeting us at an event, so looking at what do people think of us when they see us at events like SaaS Talk. It can be if they sign up and the first thing they get is an email from sales, what does that email look like? Is it consistent? And we really try to create an internal understanding of who we are and start from there to create messaging that we want. And then we look at what people actually think of us, and we try to actually close the gap on those 3 steps: what we think of ourselves, how we communicate it, and how people receive it.
Okay, makes sense. Nicola, Lydia, maybe chime in.
Yeah, I think it's really important to say what brand isn't.
Sure.
It's not your logo, it's not your strapline, it's not your great marketing swag, much as I love my socks. It's really about what people say about you when you're not in the room. And it's really important to understand that it's what they, your customers and your employees are saying about you, not what you're saying about yourselves.
Right, yeah. Lydia?
I think branding allows you to give like a human touch to your company, and it really helps you to differentiate yourself from your competition.
Yeah, okay, great. Some of the things that we talked about, we all know that in the SaaS world, everyone is obsessed with metrics, and I think metrics are the hardest thing to name and to then track and follow. So how do you actually measure brand, and what tools do you use for measurement, and how often do those metrics change? Maybe, Nicola, you could start with that.
Sure. I think there's 2 really important things to be tracking. I think one is your brand awareness, and that's fairly straightforward. How many people are searching for you? How many people are talking about you, which you can measure through social mentions, so tools like Sprout Social, Brandwatch. Also, how many people are coming straight to your website directly? But I think the second thing that's really important, and goes back to the first question, is about what's your brand perception and really understanding what your customers are saying about you, and also what your employees are saying about you. And that can be as simple as just sending out a short survey. So using someone like Typeform, asking them, what do you think of our brand?
Or even using it, G2 Crowd, ask for the customer reviews and pull that through, which then also...
Great tool.
Yeah, I think so as well. So yeah, I think Typeform, G2 Crowd, always getting a pulse on what your customers are thinking and saying is key. Lydia, maybe would love to hear your take on it.
We mostly do it pretty similar. We also measure like the growth in direct visits or mentions on social. We're advertising a lot on YouTube, and we actually have a brand campaign running there. So what we did together with Google it's called like brand lift measurements. So they measured for us how many people did see our video and how did this influence our branded searches. So that's also a cool way to measure kind of the effect of like a brand campaign.
So, and just before Liam, before you chime in here, I'm curious on NPS. And how do you measure NPS? I mean, I feel like that's a loaded question, but I mean, maybe add there and answer the original question as well would be great.
NPS is pretty much God in our company. We have a channel called Feedback on Slack where we get every single NPS review, we get a daily review of what our average is over the last 30 days. And we have a running promise from our CTO. If we have a 30-day average that's above 90, he takes us all out for lunch. And I think we got to 87 earlier this year, and people started recommending restaurants, and then it dropped down to like to 82 and a little.
Because everybody is so focused on the restaurants rather than the NPS.
No, I wouldn't say that much. I would just say there's always things you can improve, but it's a really strong way for us. I don't associate NPS with brand though. I mean, I wouldn't want to take too much credit for, and like, I like to look at metrics that I feel that can like drive my decisions or that I drive. So NPS, I say, like, is the whole company, right? And so on the one hand, yes, it's a reflection of your brand, it's what people think of you, but I'd have to give a lot of credit to like our support team, our sales team, to the product team, to the engineers, for that. And what we do is look at what are the things people give us, what do our detractors say about us. I think it's nice when we get, a good NPS score and someone says, I love the product, it's amazing, but you can't really do that much with positive feedback, as it turns out. It's really just like, yes, we were right in caring.
Right.
And we asked for a review, obviously.
Exactly.
Yes, we do. But I like looking at our detractors and looking at, okay, like, some detractors, sometimes you read detractors and you're like, okay, that's kind of a given. Like, right. We already knew that about ourselves. So it's nice it also validates that, okay, like the thing we knew was the trade-off of using our product is perceived that way. Right. And on the one hand, you want to mitigate that and make people not think that way. But on the other hand, you kind of have an expectation that you're good at some things and you're less good at other things than other people. But to come back to the original question, I always like for me, brand is just the top of the funnel. It's awareness. Right. And so on the one hand, the bottom of our funnel, like where it switches, I would say is on things like site traffic, unique visitors or visitors to your website. That's sort of like the end of brand almost. Right. And then it enters the top of the acquisition funnel where whoever's in charge of acquisition is looking at that number as the top, and then they're trying to convert as many people as possible, doing all the amazing things that they do. But then for the top of our funnel, what I like to look at is if you ask someone who isn't a user but is in your target persona about the problem you're trying to solve, do they think of you? So we run a brand awareness survey at the beginning of the year, basically targeting engineers ages 18 to 65, right? Like just across the board, just trying to look at like, when I say search, what do you think of? Sure. As it turns out, they think of Google every once in a while. Yeah, shocking. Very informative. Right. But it was very interesting to see the spectrum of like, when you said like, okay, if you were going to redo the search on your product, what would you look at using today? And that for us is very informative. And then when we say like, have you ever heard of this thing called Algolia? Then you get, you do sort of the unassisted. Unassisted part of the survey, and then the second half, the assisted part. And I find that to be insanely valuable. In fact, I'm still very skeptical of the results we got because they ended up being more positive than I would have expected them to be. Interesting. Which either means we're doing a great job, but I don't think it's that. I actually think we just accidentally assisted them way too quickly. Maybe. And so on the one hand, like there's a really tactical thing you can do, which is to say like, if I talk to someone who's a potential customer that's never actually entered into our funnel before, what would they say about us? Right. And then if I mention it to them, sort of forcibly entering them into the funnel, then what do they think of us? Right. Without having seen the pitch, without seeing the website and the collateral and everything. And I find that from a brand perspective to be like, as far disconnected as you can be from the brand without actually, while still engaging with someone. And so that for us is a really interesting place to look at. That being said, it's not something you're going to run every week. Right. It's not a cohort analysis thing. It's really potentially once a quarter, but to be honest, we haven't run it in 6 months. Yeah. There was a lot of interesting feedback, and we knew we weren't going to use any extra feedback to do anything different, and so we went from there. Sure. Yeah. I think doubling back on something that you mentioned on the detractors, and something that we think about at G2 Crowd, both for ourselves as well as our customers, is that detractor and that less than stellar feedback is, in our opinion, a gold mine. It is. We all want to hear all the great things about our brand, but it's super important to get the not so great things so that you can both publicly address it in a meaningful way as well as internally address it. So I'm just curious, thinking about that
that piece of this. You know, we talk about NPS as a very normal, standard measurement, and you know, again, I think organization by organization, it varies widely what that actually means. But just curious to think about, like, truly, aside from the hard measurements of NPS, like, what is it that you're really tactically getting out of it, you know? And I'd just be curious to kind of hear what your
I think
thoughts.
it's not just about the detractors as well. I think it's also about the passives, the ones
Yes.
that are like, your brand's okay, and they're the ones that are most likely to churn.
Right.
And it's such a valuable opportunity to actually convert them into promoters.
Yeah.
And I'm just astonished by how many people track NPS and talk about their NPS score.
Right.
When you ask, what do you do with that feedback? They say, oh, nothing. And
Exactly.
if you're asking for that information, you need to act on it too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, Lydia, you know, if you guys, how do you use NPS? Do you use it? You know, I mean, and to Nicola's point, you know, it's the neutral and the passive and the detractors that I really, again, like, I can't emphasize enough, like, that's where the real value is. I'd be curious if you guys look at it that way as well.
Totally, yeah. We do NPS with all of our users, so I think it's a great way to find out more about your brand, actually. You know, what is your brand image? What are the top 3 things, what people love about you, and that's what you can use in your own marketing communication too, right? And you will also find out why they will leave or why they rather go to your competition, so you know what to fix. So I think it's a great way to use in your branding.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I just ask, what tools are you using to measure NPS, as we're talking about tools too?
Delighted?
Difficult.
Is
Yeah,
that right?
that's what we're
Delighted?
using.
Is that the
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I mean, we actually, for us, we use actually G2 Crowd. We actually ask the NPS score, and what we've recognized is that the in-market buyers, you know, that's not a tool, that's not a measurement they look at in terms of what software to buy. But what we're finding is the brands love it, because if they don't have an NPS tool, they're able to get to that very easily and quickly through each individual review, and then double down into, you know, kind of what they want to do or respond to, both internally and publicly on it. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a good, fair number of providers out there that do NPS, but I don't mean to plug, but G2 Crowd also does it as well. Thinking about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just curious, like, thinking about other brand measurements, what else do you measure? Like, what are the key measurements?
So we look a lot at support. One of the things about Algolia is we don't actually have a support team. Everyone in the engineering team runs support. The idea is, if you're a Python engineer and you have a problem with our Python client, probably the best person to talk to is our Python engineer.
For sure.
And no matter how many support engineers we hire, they're never going to be good at covering every stack and especially every nuanced question. One of the things that I like to look at is, what are the questions that come up recurring? And you really want to look at, like, for me, the big thing that brand can achieve is, one, identifying an advantage that isn't an explicit advantage.
Right.
Like, people are like, oh my God, it was super easy to read your documentation, which is a nice thing for us, and it's something that we can really leverage as an added bonus of our company, which isn't necessarily a reason to use the product, but it's definitely something that we want our brand to be associated with.
Absolutely.
And so pulling up the things that people like is good, and pulling up the places where they're like, oh, I expected friction but didn't, and things like that. And it can be very qualitative. Like, I think a lot of what I do is, especially, like, everything we do runs on Slack in terms of communication. Almost every product we use has a notification channel inside of Slack.
Yeah.
So I follow all of them.
Yeah.
Like, I wake up in the morning and it's like 100 channels that I stopped reading the newspaper and I just started reading our Slack.
Yeah.
And it's just every conversation, every type of thing. And on the one hand, it's a lot of information, but you start to see patterns over time, and you start to connect the operational things with a creative way of expressing that, and how can you leverage that. And so for us, support is a really big thing, of just looking at, like, where is there friction in the customer journey, especially around things like, it's not necessarily a brand activity, but we spun up an education program just to help make it easier for people to get from, like, what is search to oh, I can actually build that and I can do it in 45 minutes. Like, it's not, I don't have to be a Google engineer to build that. And so just, we looked at the idea of the gap between how hard people thought it was to do it and how easy it can be to use.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is just to give people as much information as possible.
Right.
And so you identify that gap and you look at, okay, what's the best way we could do that? So we just spun up YouTube videos explaining everything from like how do search algorithms work to like how to get started with building your first search interface.
Yeah, which is amazing. I mean, I think simple, plain English, no marketing jargon is critical.
No
You know, I mean, acronyms. I think we come up with many. Curious on other thoughts on measurements.
I think it's not just about customer support, it's also sales. That's a really valuable source of insight too.
Right.
And particularly for inbound leads, if you're losing them, why are you losing them?
Right.
Do they think you're something else, something you're not?
Right. Yeah.
Also, if you don't have yet all the tools like brand voice or whatever to measure, what we did the other day when we were having a growth marketing workshop, we just asked into the audience who has ever heard of Bynder, and half of the hands of the audience was raised, and it was really cool to see because we did the same thing 1 year ago and it was like only 2 people raising their hands.
Right.
So that's not very scientific way of measuring it.
That's
it's a good
throwing the grass in the air, right? Before you do the golf swing.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of that, like I can't see into the audience. I don't know if you guys would be interesting to do a poll.
I'm blinded by those lights.
Me too. It's crazy. Okay, well, great. So thinking about some of the other things that we talked about in preparation, how do you ensure your teams and employees buy in and use your brand messaging? I think that's, that is so mission critical for all of us. Lidia, maybe you want to take the lead on that?
Sure. First of all, I think branding really starts from within the company. So if your own employees don't know what your brand is about, or they don't believe in it, so it starts with every call sales does on your phone, or how you answer the phone if the 10th recruiter calls you that day. It's all branding. So we of course, at Bynder, we of course use our own tool to make sure that everybody has always access to the right templates and is always using the right logo. And we, as a marketing department, together with the creatives, we approve every single piece of content that's been created from other people in the company. Also, people can create business cards, and we can approve them. Or we also have, of course, brand guidelines documented, and we ask every new employee to read them, and we even have a little small test afterwards to confirm that they have really read them. Another thing is we're also having like an internal rewards program where our employees can share content we prepared from the marketing department on their social media, and they can gather points and exchange it into swag and things. And last but not least, because for us and our clients, branding is so important, we started off 2 years ago having like a customer Bynder employee event. It's called actually On Brand. And we're now in the 3rd year, and it's happening in October if someone's really interested in learning more about branding. It's in Amsterdam, and we made it to 1,500 people there, and it's,
Very cool. Yeah, you guys maybe want to chime in on...
So I think most importantly is brand your employees as soon as possible. So as soon as they walk in the door, hat, socks, tattoo, absolutely critical.
Swag works, for sure.
But seriously, I think it's actually about taking it outside of just the marketing department, because people tend to go brand, marketing, and you've got to get involvement and buy-in from the whole company. And I think it's really important to create those brand ambassadors in each of the departments that's representing the brand.
Right.
Yeah, I think to touch on that, so there's a few things internally. One is, one of the things that I say a lot is like, if you want to build a community, you have to be a community. And a lot of our brand decisions are about getting everyone involved. So one thing is everyone at Algolia has access to the Algolia Twitter account, and they can suggest content. They don't even have to write out like a full-fledged thought. They can just be like, I think this article's cool, and they can share an article.
Yeah.
And it'll come to anyone in the marketing team who can just modify it or whatever, or change the messaging and put it out. And so we really try to lower the barrier to entry to being a voice of the company.
Yeah.
And that goes for everything from like, we encourage and help, we give public speaking sessions in our company in order to get more people feeling comfortable speaking on stage, so that we don't just have to send brand directors to talk about brand all day, but we can actually send our engineers to talk about engineering, which is our core job. The other thing is, instead of, say, writing content, most of our content team is dedicated to editing content, and we actually work to help everyone in the company write. We have a mission to get 50% of the company contributing, and it's not just about like, it's really about saying like, who's the best person to talk about our product? The people who build it. Who does our core audience want to listen to? The people that built the product. And so our job isn't to like hire engineers who are great writers. Our job is to hire great engineers and help them write.
Right.
And so we really try to outline an infrastructure that lowers the barrier to entry. And then the last one is we really worked, one of the first things I did when I came in is, I think there's a number of ways you can go about this. I found this thing called the Brand Strategy Canvas, which is basically like a lean startup type thing, like a one-pager that just asks you really explicit questions. And it's things like, what are the rational benefits? What are the irrational benefits? Like, it asks you like, when you speak, what do you sound like? And things like that. And it really helped us divide up a lot of things that I think when you're inside a company and you've been in there for a long time, whether you're a founder or whether you're an engineer, it's really easy to muddle up like, oh, here's our benefits and here's our problems. Oh, and our persona likes this. And oh, we came out with this. And you get all these different things together. It's really hard to break it down and say, like, okay, but like, if someone says, what does Algolia do? What can you say?
Right.
And we really tried to work with as many people, and then of course making that doc publicly available to people
Right.
to make it really easy for anyone in our team to say like, oh yeah, like, what does our voice sound like? Are we what is it? Humble and authentic,
Sure.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
that's something that I can use, and if I want to write something, if I want to write an article, I can use that as a checkpoint to say, am I being on brand?
Sure, yeah.
And then we are also putting together a deck with things like, how do we talk about things like politics, and how do we talk about things like competition?
Right.
And getting everyone on the same page and saying like, if you're curious, if you're at SaaS Talk and someone comes up to you and says, so what do you think of Google? What do we say at Algolia?
Right.
It's a very interesting topic on the one hand, great
Yes.
company.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you don't want to say anything else other than great company.
Exactly.
And so basically, for me, a lot of it is just creating the support infrastructure that makes anyone able to do my job.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most coherent way that I've seen to do brand strategy internally, is just lowering the barrier to entry and saying like, anyone can represent our brand because they all have the tools.
Right. Yeah, we do the same at G2 Crowd. I mean, we empower the entire organization to speak on behalf, and we do some of the similar things that you do in terms of kind of getting people prepped and guidelines and what to say, and at least frame it so that they can use it in their own voice and words, right? I mean, we've hired talented young people, and I don't want them to lose their voice, but it's very hard to give them the guidance and then, let the baby bird go out and, figure out, how to use it in their own words. And a lot of times they just don't have the experience just yet to be able to navigate some of those conversations and whatnot. I think the other thing, we do especially, again, we use the customer to really help form the brand and the message and leverage it. And, I encourage all of our customers and brands to do that. I mean, you think about reviews, and it's rich, unique, user-generated content that you can use multiple times, multiple different ways. And so, I totally agree with everything that you guys mentioned here. So I know we're running up. Oh, geez, we're running up on time. So time. I know, Mike, it's flashing. So last question, and then we could get to some of the audience questions. What are concrete suggestions and recommendations that the audience can put to use today? I think walking away from here with something super tangible, I think, is super helpful. So curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah. I would say no matter where you are, how big or small you are, it's really good to sit down. We sat down with the founders and the rest of the team and really recognize that there's really 3 stages between you and your users. There's what you think of yourself, and you'd be surprised how much that can differ if you don't put it down on paper, and how much putting it down on paper makes you challenge a lot of the assumptions you have. Then there's how you decide to communicate that, and then there's what people think of you. And just lining up those 3 things and thinking, actually, if all of those 3 things were the same thing, that would mean that all of your users and everyone in the world thought exactly of you what you think of yourself, then you're in an ideal state. And really trying to smush those lines and get them as close together is probably the best thing you can do. And having a vague understanding of like, okay, we think we're the next big thing in X, but our users think we're a nice tool that connects with Slack. So maybe we need to bridge the gap between what we think of ourselves. And the best way to do that is to change how you talk about yourself. And so I think those 3 lines are probably my best litmus test for how are we doing.
Okay. Nicola?
Yeah, I mean, just to go on from what you're saying, Liam, there's a really nice framework, the 3P. So first of all, what is your brand's purpose? Like, what are you doing to make the world a better place? The second one is what's your positioning? Like, what does your product do and how is it different from what's already out there? And the third one is what's your personality? So if you met your brand at a company, at a party, what would you think about them?
Yeah. Lydia?
Two things. I think, first of all, when you start defining your brand value, don't make the mistake to only involve your marketing team or your founders or anything. It's really a thing all employees have to do together. So run internal focus groups and really ask them for their feedback and what they think your brand is. And the other thing is really take time to create templates and make sure that people know where to find these templates.
Yeah, that's super important. So looks like we have one question, and hopefully we can continue on. But how can you measure internal, external brand perception? Anybody want to tackle that? Sure.
Internal brand perception, we measure it through Office Vibe, which is a tool that allows you to ping your team and ask questions every week. And so you can get a good idea of how motivated people are. Among other things, it essentially measures an internal NPS. How likely are you to stay here in 2 years?
Right.
How likely are you to recommend your friends come work here? Things like that are really interesting.
Yeah.
Just to get an idea of like employee satisfaction, but really employee understanding of the brand. And then from external, I mean, everything we talked about today. So everything from NPS to brand awareness surveys. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And I think what's really important is you don't do this as a one-off exercise. It's something you've got to keep measuring. So every 6 months, I would suggest.
Okay. Looks one more, unless I'm getting kicked off. So we all operate globally. How do you ensure consistency of brand message and tone across languages and cultures? That is like a loaded question. Oof. So I'm not sure we can answer it all, but maybe a 10-second answer?
Sure. Basically, when localizing, it's can be sometimes difficult to keep consistency, but if you just handle the approval and review of all branded content centrally, then nothing should go wrong.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the conversation, and please feel free to reach out to any of us individually if you have other questions. So I think next up is Kyle Porter from Sales Loft, and we'll go from there.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.